Hey, Richard Matthews here, coming to you from our trip around the country in the RV. We are in Mobile, Alabama at the moment, and today I want to show you something really cool with some automations on how when you do a webinar or an instant video or any video sales letter or something like that, if you want to do follow-up that is based on actual real-world consumption of that video, then I'm going to show you how to do that using Infusionsoft today. And two other tools. We're going to use Google Tag Manager to accomplish the actual consumption tracking, and we're going to use Zapier to create the tags in Infusionsoft we want to create. So the first thing, the reason why you might want to do this, there are essentially anytime you do a video sales letter or a webinar or any type of video consumption where you're making an offer, there are three groups of people that you want to follow up with, and I've got them listed here on the screen so you can check up here. This is in Infusionsoft, one of the campaigns we've got going. You have three people, three groups. You have the people who watched the video and saw the offer, right? So these people are ones who have both the context for the offer, because they saw the content, they saw the actual sales portion, and they saw the offer. So these people you can follow up with just a reminder of the offer and where to go to get it, right? So that's the first group of people that you might want to follow up with. The second group of people are people who watched some of the video, generally enough that they have the context for the offer, but they didn't stick around long enough to actually see the offer, right? So this is like if you're on a webinar, they saw all the content that you taught, but they left before you got through the offer. So these people, when you follow up with them, you might want to get in and give them. You don't need to give them the context. You could just say, "Hey, you missed the best part. Here's the where the offer details are and where you can find them." So you can just give them the offer stuff. And then you have the last group of people, which are people who didn't watch. They didn't watch at all, or they didn't watch enough to get the context for the offer. And they didn't get the offer. So in your follow-up sequence, you want to make sure they have both access to the context for the offer. So if it's training or if it's something so they understand the offer real well, you can get that plus the offer details in the emails that you're following up with them. So the structure is actually fairly simple in Infusionsoft. I'm not going to go into it too much. It is essentially just any people who didn't watch the actual video are going to go into the didn't watch sequence, and then we're going to have tags. Basically, if they watched 10% or more of the video, they're going to be pulled out of the reminder sequence, stuck over here, and then we're going to get a decision tree. And the decision tree, which we're going to build in a minute, is basically going to say, hey, if they watched 10% or more, if they didn't watch 10% or more, they're going to go into the didn't watch sequence. If they watched I believe we're going to do 50% on this video because that's where the offer starts, then we're going to put them in the watched but missed the offer. And if they watched 50% or more, we'll put them through the watched and saw offer sequence. So we're going to build all of that out, and then we'll be able to set people into the sequences here. So the first thing that you'll need is Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager does some really, really amazing things for Google tracking, for video tracking. So this is going to work for videos that are embedded on your site with Wistia. It will work on videos embedded on your site with YouTube, and it can work on your site with videos embedded with Vimeo. So I actually have a container for Google Tag Manager that has all of these tags in here already, all these ones from here all the way up. And this will set up your video tracking for YouTube and Wistia. You can grab the pieces for it from Vimeo if you want and add them from Lunametrics. But I've got all this stuff in here already. And real quick, if you've never used this before, on your Tag Manager account, you just go to Admin and Import Container. And you will basically choose the container file, which I will put in a link below this video so you can access the container file. And you're going to add it to your existing workspace, and you're going to tell it to merge your tags and rename conflicting tags so you don't mess anything up. And then you just import it. And what that should do for you is it should add in a folder here called Video Tracking to your Google Tag Manager that will have a number of things. So I'm just going to go over real quick what these things are. We will have the Google Analytics video tracking for YouTube and Wistia. That will send all of your variables over to Google Analytics. It'll also add the triggers for Wistia and for YouTube, and it'll add the tracking script for Wistia and YouTube. So what this is doing is the tracking script is basically it's looking for how much people are watching. And then for all of the events, whether it's play or pause or watched 10% or watched 90% or whatever it is, it's going to send all of those events to the data layer in Tag Manager. And then basically we are just creating triggers that are capturing it. So what we're going to do is go over how to create some of the triggers today. So we have the triggers for watched certain percentages of the video, and that's what these are. And these are just the variables that are going to give us the information, like what actions did they take, was it play or pause, what's the name of the video that they used, and the URL of the video. So all of that data we can use in our Zaps and Zapier. So I'm not going to do much in Tag Manager at this point. The first thing we need to do is we need to go over to Zapier. So Zapier, we're going to make a Zap, and we're going to basically say that, hey, we want to have a webhook by Zapier. And the webhook is going to accept the data that we're going to send it from Google Tag Manager. So we're going to say, hey, we want a catch hook that's going to accept data. And we are going to, there we go, set up webhook. Apparently I skipped past it. Copy the webhook to the clipboard. And that's the first step that we need to do. And we're going to go over to Google Tag Manager, and your triggers essentially are what are going to send data to Zapier for Infusionsoft. So I have a trigger that I set up here, and the trigger that I set up basically says, for anyone who has watched 10% of our Winter 2017 webinar, I want to trigger this webhook. So the webhook, you're going to set this up. The trigger type that you want is a custom event, and we're going to use the event name Wistia Track because our event is coming from Wistia. If it was YouTube, it would be YouTube Track, and you can see the event names in the other files. And we're going to do basically we want the trigger to fire on only some events. We want the video action to contain 10%, and we want the video name to contain T-Hail webinar, because that's the name of the webinar video that we want this trigger to fire for. So that is the trigger that we're going to set up, and we're going to do this basically 3 times, one for 10%, one for 50%, and one for 90% on this video. So we've set the trigger up, and then you create the tag. So the tag that we created is called Send 10% Watched Tag to Infusionsoft via Zapier. So very clear naming on what it is we're doing, and the tag type that you want when you're creating it is you want a custom image tag. So when you're creating a new tag, basically you say, when you click on here, you're looking for this one that says custom image. And a custom image tag is literally, it's just a URL. I'm not sure why they call it an image tag, but you can put in a URL. So in here, I am going to do one thing. I'm going to paste in our webhook URL. So there's our webhook URL. And your follow, what you want to do is after the following, the trailing slash here at the end, you want to put a question mark, and you want to put email equals user cookie. And the email user cookie is going to send the user email to the system. So the user cookie is a variable that we set up in Tag Manager in another video. So when you have someone opt in for something, you're going to grab their email address anyways. And what we do with that in Tag Manager is we actually save that email address to a cookie so that we can then call on it later for things like this. So I'll have another video that shows how to do that. But anyways, I have the user email cookie set up as a variable already. So if you don't have that, you want to watch the other video on how to set up the user variable email cookie. And that's what we're doing here. So this is the data we're going to send over to Infusionsoft, is just the email address. So we're going to go ahead and click Save. And that is our tag. So our tag is set up and ready to go. So first thing we're going to do here is we actually need to send data over to Zapier, right? So if we click Continue, you'll notice it's not going to pull anything out. So what we need to do is we need to just take a copy of our link that we have here. We're going to copy that. We're going to paste it in here, and we're going to paste in a test email. So test@test.testy.com, and just hit that, and it'll say status success attempt. All that's well and good. Now we can go ahead and hit refresh fields. Now that it's refreshed the fields, we can continue, and we want to pull in samples. And we did that. And if we click view your hook, we have query string email, test@testy.com. So basically it's just saying, hey, we got the data that you're sending over, and it's all well and good. That's all we need to do. So now the hook is able to pull in emails, And now we have to choose an action app, which in this case we're going to use Infusionsoft. And with our Infusionsoft account, we want to create or update a contact. And we need to connect your Infusionsoft account. If you've never connected an account before, you'll need to make sure you connect it. And we're going to authorize the account. And we are ready to go on that. So save and continue. And now this is where the fun happens. So email address, we can actually go in and say, hey, the email address is the email coming from that hook. And that is almost all we need to do. We don't have the name, first name and last name, anything, but then we have the tag that we want to add. So we have all of our tags in here. So it says here, tags that do not exist in Infusionsoft will be ignored. So we need to actually create the tag first in Infusionsoft. Okay, and if you have never done that before, that is going to be under CRM settings and tags. It'll bring you to this screen here. We're going to add a tag. And we're going to put in a tag name, watched 10% of Winter 2017 webinar. And I'm not going to put it in any category right now, but I'm just going to put watched 10%, add tags. So now we have that tag in Infusionsoft, and we can paste that tag over here. It might take a while for your tag to show up over here, but once it does, you can just click on it. It fills that in, and now we have the two fields that we have here. We have the email, which is required, and we have the tag we want to be applied, which is there. So all the rest of this stuff can be ignored. We're going to go down to continue. So, and now we have the data that we're sending over. Email is Testy McTesterson, and tags watched 10% of webinar. And we will send test to Infusionsoft. We should get a success message here in just a moment. There we go. Test was sent to Infusionsoft. It's all green. So we're going to hit finish on this. And we're going to call this the same thing we called it in Google Tag Manager, just so we have a reference for what it is about. Save that. And we're going to go to see it on our dashboard. So the Zapier portion is done. So we'll close this tab. We got the Tag Manager portion is done. So we're going to submit all of our changes and say, hey, we added 10% watch tag. And publish. There we go. So we're going to go back to our workspace, and now it is time to actually test everything. So we're going to put our website here in preview mode. And you'll note we have our Google Analytics tag, or sorry, Google Tag Manager stuff is firing here at the bottom. And we're going to go to the workshop, and we're going to register for the workshop. So we're going to put full name in is Testy McTesterson and test at testy.com. And you can see all of our tags that have fired down here already. Reserve my seat. And you'll see, hey, look, there's our email, test at testymctesterson.com. Published through. And the video is playing here in my ears. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the sound on that so we don't doesn't mess with us. And what I'm going to show you here is, so we have our Google Analytics event tracking has fired off. So the Wistia tracking is going, and the tracking script for Wistia is going. And the user cookie is going. So, and we just had our 30-second page view went off. But what you can see here is we're going to see in a little while, it's going to actually start firing off the 10% cookie pixels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this, pause the recording, or actually I'll speed this recording up in post so you can see when it fires for the 10%. Okay, so you can see we hit our 10% mark, and the tags actually changed. And now we have send 10% watch tag to IS via Zapier fired. So we have the actual 10% tag fired, and that was this Wistia track event. And we sent that event both to Google Analytics and we sent it to Zapier. So what we can do now is I'm going to just pause this video. There we go. And I'm going to go over to Zapier, and we're going to go to task history. And we can see success. Send 10% watch tag to Zapier. That means that the tag fired in Google Tag Manager, it hit Zapier. And if we go over to our contacts and search for, let's just grab our watched 10% webinar tag, search, we have Testy McTesterson. Here we go, that's our test that we did. And you can see it even has things like the lead source that it pulled in from the workshop. And we have, so lead source from the workshop, Testy McTesterson, it pulled the name through. We got the email address, test@testy.com, and the tag is there. So now the last little bit is to go back into our campaign builder and actually hook it all up. So we'll go into our campaign, and our decision tree is the 10% section is going to go, is the tag that we are going to pull people off on. So configure tag, the tag here is watched 10% or more of the webinar. That will pull them through the reminder sequence because they watched 10%. Now, our first decision tree is the only thing we can build at this point. So rules for didn't watch offer, our rule is going to be if contact tag contains watched 10% winter webinar, and if contacts tag does not contain, and we'll have to do a 50% winter 2017 webinar. I wonder if it'll let me create a tag on the fly. It may not let me do that. So I'll have to create this tag later, but that's the way that our first rule will work, is they watched 10%, but they didn't make it to 50%, then we're gonna send them to the didn't watch enough of they didn't get the context for the offer. So that's the way the rule will work, and that is the way we'll set up each of our decision timings, is basically they watched 10% at least, but they didn't watch 50. This will be watched 50, but didn't watch 90, and this will be watched 90 or more. And then we'll have our 3 actual real-world dynamic, they actually consumed our video, so we can follow up with them dynamically that way. Hopefully this is helpful. There's a link below the video here to get you access to the tag manager files that you'll need to import and get all the video tracking set up. And you'll just need a Zapier and Infusionsoft to do that. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will do another one of these that shows you how to do the same thing if you're using ActiveCampaign. Okay, one last thing. While I was editing this video, I realized I made a mistake in the campaign. We actually need to give time for people to watch the whole webinar after they've watched 10% before they hit the decision tree. So between the tag and the decision tree, you need to add a timer. In this case, you want it to be as long as the webinar is. So I have it waiting 90 minutes. And then it'll continue on, and that's when they'll hit the decision tree for which tags they have or don't have. And you need to make sure you have that timer in there after you pull them out of your reminder sequence, so you can get them into the proper sequence. Otherwise, they would have just, as soon as they watched 10%, they would always go into the didn't watch one, even if they stayed and watched the whole thing. So we want to make sure you give them time to watch the webinar on that. And that is the last bit there.